The last 4 wars that the United States has engaged in, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, and now Ukraine, we have lost each and every one of those wars. The enemy in Vietnam was the Communist Party of North Vietnam. What does rule? What rules in Vietnam today is the Communist Party of North Vietnam. They won. We lost in Afghanistan. The enemy was the Taliban. Who rules Afghanistan today? The Taliban. They won. We lost. I could go on, but you get the picture. And if you were not bamboozled by American mass media, you would know what everyone else in the world knows, which is that the war in Ukraine is over. The Russians won, and Ukraine and the West was defeated. He's spelling out a pattern we keep pretending not to see. Vietnam lost. Afghanistan lost. Iraq lost. And now Ukraine, same trajectory. The enemies we fought still rule the countries we invaded. That's not coincidence. That's strategy. Define an outcomes we can't achieve, and the world sees the truth, even if our media won't say it out loud. The war is effectively over. Russia won. The West lost, and denial won't change the scoreboard. Along the way, the United States went from the dominant economic power, which gathered around it allies. They're called the G7, the Group of Seven. And just so we're all clear, they include Canada, Japan, Britain, France, Germany, and Italy. The United States and its allies, arguably the center of the world economy for much of the last 75 years, but no longer. What this really shows is the end of Western monopoly. For 70 years, the G7 acted like the control room of the world economy. But history never lets one group stay on top forever. Rome learned it. Britain learned it. And now, the US-led order is learning it. While the West, and it's not coming back. In the year 2020, another economic powerhouse caught up. That powerhouse is called the People's Republic of China, and its allies, who are called the BRICS, B-R-I-C-S, named after the 5 countries that started that alliance. Much bigger than 5 now, but those 5, their acronym, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. In the year 2020, if you add up the GDP, that's a number we use in economics. It's a simple number, rough idea. It's a total output in 1 year of goods and services in a country. If you add in 2020, the GDP of the United States and our G7 allies, it was roughly equal to the GDP of the People's Republic of China and its BRICS allies. Since 2020, the growth of China and its allies has meant that the gap between China and its allies economically, total output of goods and services, has grown larger each year. As it is growing larger this year, and as it will grow larger again next year and into the foreseeable future, this is the moment the West didn't see coming. For years, they treated BRICS like a side group, not a serious competitor. But when China and its partners matched the G7's output in 2020, the game changed. Since then, the gap has only widened, not because BRICS is anti-West, but because they're building faster, trading smarter, and focusing on growth instead of geopolitical drama. The world isn't unipolar anymore. It's becoming balanced, and the West is struggling to adjust. China and its allies have been growing faster than the United States every year for the last 25, and they have now caught up and gone further. If you add up the GDP of the United States and our allies, it's about 28% of world output. If you do the same for China and the BRICS allies, it's 35% of the world's output. We are not the economic powerhouse of the world. We are not the richest country. We're not any of those things that our leaders keep saying. In a kind of mantra that should remind you of people who cope with a changed reality by telling themselves it never changed. This is simple. The world has moved on, but our leaders haven't. China and BRICS are now the bigger economic bloc. Yet Washington keeps repeating the "we're number one" line like a comfort phrase. That's not confidence. That's denial. Change is there whether you need to deny it or not. Every country in the world right now, every company engaged in world trade right now is rethinking its strategy to take account of where the wealth now is. It's in China and the BRICS, growing faster than it is in the quote-unquote mature economies of the United States and the West. The shift is real, and pretending otherwise won't stop it. Every serious business and government already knows where the momentum is toward the BRICS markets, not the old Western ones. Growth attracts strategy, and strategy follows opportunity if wealth is moving east. Global planning will too, and that's exactly what's happening behind closed doors. No matter what politicians say in public, for the first time in your lifetime, every one of you that's watching or listening, for the first time in your lifetime, the United States has a powerful, successful competitor. We haven't had that before. They were all laid prostrate by the Second World War, as I mentioned before. But now we have an enormously successful, rapidly growing powerhouse, China. That changes everything. This is the first real rival the U.S. has had in our lifetime. A competitor it can't dominate or ignore. And when a peer finally shows up, the old playbook stops working. That's the shift China creates. And they're gaining and they're growing. This year, the United States will grow its GDP maybe 2%, 2-something percent. China's growth this year, 5%. Do you understand? It's relentless. Russia didn't win the war in Ukraine all by itself. It won it because right behind it is China. When the United States and the Europeans thought they could Russia by not buying the oil and gas whose exports Russia depends on, Russia smiled and turned to India and China and said, "Would you mind buying our oil and gas for a while we take care of this war?" No problem. Mr. Modi and Mr. Xi Jinping made that decision. As everyone should have understood, they would. The United States said, "We will sanction you." They laugh. Only Americans take these threats seriously because they don't want to face what it is I'm trying to get across here. We are in a new world, and denial is not an adequate response. This is the reality our leaders don't want to admit. The world didn't freeze when the West said sanctions. It simply rerouted. China and India became Russia's economic backup. And suddenly, where U.S. pressure isn't a guarantee, it's a gamble. And denial won't change that. We are headed on a collision course. Mr. Trump, who ran, and I have no reason to doubt his sincerity on this point, who ran his campaign saying, among other things, "I want to end these endless wars." You remember, he was going to end Ukraine in a day or two, and he was going to fix everything in Gaza. And he was going to this, that, and the other thing. He hasn't none of it. Ukraine war has proceeded. He didn't solve it in a week, and he didn't solve it with a phone call. He just didn't solve it. And about endless wars, he attacked Iran. That's not ending a war. That's provoking one. He has threatened the president of Mexico to invade that country, ostensibly to deal with drugs. He has threatened Canada to make it a 51st state. He has threatened Denmark to take Greenland away from it. He recently threatened Nigeria because he doesn't like the way Muslims and Christians attack Chris. And as you know, he has moved huge amounts of our military right off the coast of Venezuela and threatens to attack there. This is militarism gone nuts, and very hard not to see this, which you can be sure is how the Russians and the Chinese and the rest of the world see this as the desperate effort of someone caught in a very difficult situation to find some place where he can recoup his identity as the savior, the one who's going to fix it for those angry people, his MAGA supporters, and for a skeptical American public. A nice new war, at least for a while, might do that. Now the last step, and then I'll stop. Where do the tariffs fit in? Well, here you got to admire it, because it's a little complicated, but I think I can simplify it for you. Excuse me. Tariff is a tax. You should all be aware, it's just a name of a tax of a particular kind. It's a tax levied on anything produced outside the United States that's brought into the United States to be sold and consumed. The tariff affects only that. So, for example, wine produced in Napa Valley and sold all over the United States doesn't have a tariff. Wine produced in France or Italy or Australia that comes to the United States, it does pay the tariff because it's an imported item. And the ostensible purpose of all of this was two things. One, he was going to make businesses come to the United States because they would want to produce it here, no tariff, rather than wherever they were. Tariff, they'd escape the tariff. You know, if you don't want to go on the turnpike and pay the fee, you can go the side roads and you can get there without paying the fee. Very simple idea. So he said, I'm going to bring jobs back to America. And the number 2 function of tariffs, being a tax, was to help the government be less needy of borrowing, because it would get a new revenue source. You might even say, on business. And you heard me say a few minutes ago, can't tax the donor class, can't tax the businesses. But remember, the tariff only hits the importing business. This is the contradiction nobody wants to call out. He campaigned on ending endless wars. Yet his actions are dragging the U.S. toward even more of them. Threats against Mexico, Canada, Nigeria, Venezuela. That's not de-escalation. That's escalation on autopilot. And when leaders start reaching for military solutions to fix political weakness at home, the world reads that as desperation, not strength. Which brings us to tariffs, the simple fix that was sold as a job strategy, but is really just a tax strategy dressed up as patriotism. And like all taxes on imports, the cost never stays with the businesses. It lands on ordinary Americans. Number one. And number two, he gave them a huge tax cut before he imposed the tariff. So they come out pretty good. And of course, is to raise the price, which is why our inflation continues. The importing company raises the price to the retailer, so they don't get hurt by that tariff. They pass it on. And Mr. Trump's advisors should have known this because tariffs are hundreds of years old. I teach courses in international trade, and a section of the course is the tariff, and we teach the students based on the experience of many countries over many years. When do tariffs work? When do they fail? Mr. Trump presented the tariff as though it were an unquestionable good thing. It isn't. It wasn't. And he counted on the American media not to teach you what they could have and what they should have. Happens a lot, folks. What did the tariff do? And this is another part of what our dilemma is. The tariff was a declaration by the United States of economic war against every other country in the world. This is an astounding thing. It says to the world, you want to do business in the United States, you gotta pay a tax to get us. It's not the behavior of an empire that we once were that said, we believe in free trade and we're going to make the world a place where anyone with a good idea can start a business and prosper. No, 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 no. All of that's gone. You want to do business in the United States? You pay a tax. Let me give you an example that affects your life, although in a way you may not have known about. About 15 years ago, a competition began around the world. It was a competition. Who could produce the best, cheapest electric vehicle? A car or a truck that does not run on gasoline, but runs instead on electricity. You all know Elon Musk is the richest man in the world because he did it first. But he didn't win the competition. That's why the Tesla Motor Company is in the trouble it's in now. The competition was won by Chinese company. In case you never heard of it, it's called 3 initials that, by the way, stand for English words. Build your dream. That's what it stands for. The BYD Corporation in China produces by far the best quality, cheapest electric cars and trucks. Are they for sale around the world? Yes. Have they been for sale around the world for some years now? Yes. In Paris, they are part of the taxi fleet. Why have you not seen them? Because in his first term, Mr. Trump hit them with a 25% tariff. Mr. Biden, not to be outdone, raised it to 100%, which is what it is now. So, the car cost $30,000. You could get the best electric car for about $30,000, but that's what the money would have to go to China to pay for the car. To pick it up at the dealer here, you'd have to pay the 100% tax, the tariff on that, to Uncle Sam. So, you would have to pay $60,000.30 for the car, $30 for the tariff on the car. You're not going to do that. You're going to settle for a less good car, any of the others. But that's very bad for the United States. You know why? Because everywhere else in the world, every competitor of the United States outside this country can buy the best quality truck at the lowest price, 30 grand. Only the American has to pay much more. You know what that means? We're done. The competition is over. We can't. The very steps we take to protect us hurt us. This is the real problem with these tariffs. They don't protect America. They weaken it. The rest of the world can buy the best electric cars for $30,000, while Americans are forced to pay double for something worse. We call it strategy, but it's basically self-inflicted damage. There's been no rush of companies here. They know that Mr. Trump takes the tariff away within weeks after he puts it, or he raises it, or he lowers it. The whole world is laughing this week because Switzerland achieved the reduction of its tariff from 39% to 15%, engraved with the numbers of his presidency, worth $130,000. They came here, they gave him the gifts, he dropped it to the whole world laughed, because in the rest of the world, this behavior has a name. It's called bribery. But our media will make it a remark here or there, sure. But it's part of the denial. We're at that level that a foreign government can spend what is nothing for it and achieving. We're for sale, folks. This is everything I've told you is not unusual for a declining empire in the end. And this is my final point. A declining empire usually flames out by going to war to try to recoup in war what is beyond being recouped. And so the war usually goes badly toward the end of the Roman Empire. They referred to all the people crowding in and taking over pieces of as savages, as wild tribes. They were none of those things. It's just that they were winning, and Rome could not understand, having been a dominant empire for some centuries, that it was over. More lives, reducing that poor country to a horrible condition. So the fact is, we face the following. Either we continue the way we've been going, which will end in a war with China and the BRICS, and there is no way for the United States to win such a war. They have nuclear weapons, probably more than we do. China and the BRICS together are over half the population of this planet. The United States is 4.5% of the people on this planet. The United States in G7 is under 20% of the population of this planet. It's over. The next after our decline will either be a Chinese empire, or maybe, if we're lucky, the effort we call the League of Nations after World War I, or the United Nations after World War II will be the model, a genuine multinational agreement among the people of the world, so they don't replicate the history I have just tried to summary. Those are our real choices. But I'm not pessimistic. I'm actually optimistic. I think, slowly, painfully, and hesitatingly, we are building in this country to our new political initiative that will go to the people, tell the story. We have to say, which I've tried to summarize with and for you this morning, and say we need a new political direction, new political leaders who will sit down with our Chinese counterparts, because they, like we, need to avoid the clash from which there is no recovery, nuclear war. And maybe, if we take the initiative here, we'll find kindred souls over there who will meet us halfway. And the best argument for that strategy is that it's better than any. This is the part that should worry us more than anything. When foreign governments can lower tariffs with a gift, it means policy isn't being driven by strategy. It's being driven by personal influence. And once the world figures that out, think like a superpower and start treating stop treating you like a transaction. The bigger point he's making is simple. If a country can't control its own impulses, it can't control global outcomes. That's why every path we're on right now leads to one of two futures: escalation or cooperation. And honestly, cooperation might be the only option left that doesn't end in disaster.